Knowing just 6 neighbours reduces the likelihood of feeling alone. That's according to the results of a global study led by an Australian loneliness expert. Joining me now live is the head of Nextdoor Australia, Jennie Sager. Jennie, great to see you. Thank you for joining me. Firstly, can you give us some background? What did the report itself examine?
Absolutely. So at Nextdoor, we are a neighborhood networking app. So we connect people just based on where they live. You sign up and you're joined up with your neighbors. There are plenty of other networks out there who connect you to people that you already know, but Nextdoor actually connects you to people that you don't know in your neighborhood. And the app was actually created to combat social isolation and loneliness. So the loneliness researchers were interested in looking at how these small acts of kindness that we see happening on the app every single day actually impact mental health, specifically around social isolation and loneliness. So what we did was we took a test group and we took a control group of Nextdoor users, and we had them perform simple acts of kindness. So simple things like just saying hello to a neighbor, asking a neighbor if they want to have a cup of tea, checking in on a neighbor, whether that was virtually or over the phone or in person, doing simple tasks like mowing a lawn or dropping up groceries. And then we looked at how that actually impacted social isolation and loneliness. And that's when they found that these small acts of kindness actually directly reduce feelings of loneliness and also increase neighborhood unity as well. And that knowing just 6 neighbors, as you said, we were able to quantify how many neighbors you actually need to know to get those benefits of reducing loneliness. And that number was just 6, which is really, really exciting.
And I guess as well, Jennie, a lot of us probably don't even know our neighbours. You know, we might see them go in and out of their house every day, but we don't always have the confidence to introduce ourselves and get to know one another.
You're exactly right. More than half of Australians don't actually know their neighbours. And we're actually in the middle, even before COVID, we were in the middle of a loneliness crisis here in Australia, where 1 in 4 Australians say that they felt severely lonely 3 times a week. And that was before COVID happened. And you can only imagine how much that has increased during COVID. We know that depression rates are on the rise. Again, loneliness, social isolation, anxiety is on the rise. And what was also interesting about this study is that we saw that both financial and health stress related to COVID-19 also was reduced just from these small acts of kindness and from knowing your neighbours.
Now, this was a global study as well. There were a few countries involved. Did it differ between countries?
No, it's actually really exciting because we tested this in Australia, the US, and the UK, and the results were the same across the board, where it was that number 6, and it was also about these small acts of kindness, which were all free and were all COVID safe. So these things made a difference all over the world. We did see a little bit of variance around specific things. One thing that was really interesting was that we did ask the participants about COVID restrictions in their countries. And what we saw in Australia was that Australians actually were taking the COVID restrictions very, very seriously and were listening to what their local government was saying, versus in the US and the UK, they were actually kind of ignoring these restrictions. So good news for us here in Australia. But what we did see is that didn't really impact the results of the acts of kindness that people were doing. It was just that Australians opted a bit more for the COVID-safe options, like checking in virtually versus in person.
And that's interesting results, given that Australia has had so fewer cases compared to what we've seen in the likelihood of the US. Jennie, 6 neighbours, as you've said, reduces the likelihood of loneliness. What would be your tips for people to make that move and get to know others?
Look, one thing that we know is that everybody is feeling this. If you think somebody out there is not feeling lonely, or you're the only person that is feeling this way, that is absolutely not true. And we have seen that in this study as well. So if you put something out there and you feel like, oh, nobody's responding, don't be scared to say it a little bit more bluntly and just say, hey, I'm feeling lonely, or I'd really like to get to know some people in this neighborhood, because I guarantee you will get a response, and you will see other people responding and saying that they feel the same way. Often we hear from people, oh, nobody else is talking about this in my neighborhood, but it only takes one person to kickstart that conversation. And we see it happening on Nextdoor in every single state and territory in Australia right now, where people are coming together. They're forming coffee groups, walking groups, breakfast clubs, all to combat social isolation and loneliness. Sometimes it's as simple as just putting a note under your neighbor's door, but I guarantee you that you are not alone in feeling that way.
Absolutely. It's those, might be daunting, but it's that certainly that little first step. Jennie Sager, I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you.